She was one of the most recognizable faces on Storage Wars. Millions of people watched her every single week. The sharp tongue, the no-nonsense attitude, the way she could shut down a bad decision with one look, and the chemistry with Jarrod, that push and pull that felt completely real, because it was. But behind the cameras, something was slowly falling apart. And for years, nobody had any idea. Today we're going to talk about what really happened to Brandi Passante. Not the version that aired on A&E, the real version. And by the end of this video, you're going to see her story very differently than you did before. Before Storage Wars, Brandi Passante was nobody's idea of a television star. She grew up in Texas, moved to California, and by her early 20s, she was with Jarrod Schultz, a guy she'd met when she was still a teenager. They weren't flashy, they weren't connected. They were just two people trying to build something together. They opened a used clothing store in Orange County called Now and Then. And for a while, that was the plan. That was the life. Then A&E came along. The network was developing a new show about people who bid on abandoned storage units, and they needed cast members who felt real. Not polished, not rehearsed, real. Brandi and Jarrod fit the bill perfectly. They said yes, probably not expecting much, and started filming what would become Storage Wars. Nobody, not the producers, not the network, not Brandi herself, expected what happened next. The show was a massive hit, and Brandi Passante was a huge part of why. She wasn't the biggest bidder. She didn't make the wildest finds, but she had something that nobody else on that show had: a completely natural presence on camera. She said exactly what she thought, every single time. She rolled her eyes at stupid bids. She pushed back on Jarrod without hesitating. She reacted to things the way a real person reacts, not the way a TV personality performs a reaction. Viewers saw it immediately. Fan forums lit up about her. Comment sections were full of people saying she was the only one on the show who felt genuine. By season 2, she wasn't just a supporting cast member. She was one of the main reasons people tuned in. But here's what the cameras didn't show you. Brandi and Jarrod were not married. They had been together for well over a decade at that point. They had 2 kids together, a son named Cameron and a daughter named Peyton. They ran a business together. They filmed a television show together. By every practical definition, they were a family. But there was no ring. And in interviews, Brandi was always careful, almost guarded, about how she talked about it. She'd describe Jarrod as her partner, her other half, the person she'd built everything with. But she never called him her husband, and she never really explained why. Looking back now, some people think she knew something wasn't right. That underneath the routine and the cameras and the business, there was something unstable that she couldn't quite name. And then the show got bigger, and things got harder. The appearances multiplied. The spin-off came. Brandi and Jarrod got their own show called Brandi and Jarrod, following them outside of the storage auctions. More cameras, more scrutiny, more pressure on a relationship that was already carrying more weight than it looked like from the outside. There's a thing that happens to couples when they become famous together. The version of them that the audience falls in love with, the bickering, the jokes, the making up, becomes a product. And maintaining that product while also trying to be actual human beings in an actual relationship is exhausting in a way that very few people understand unless they've lived it. Success is supposed to fix things. Most of the time, it doesn't. Most of the time, it just amplifies what was already there. What the audience saw was a couple who argued on camera and laughed about it. What was actually happening behind the scenes was more complicated than that. Jarrod's behavior was changing. The pressures were mounting. And Brandi was holding it all together, The kids, the business, the public image, in the quiet, exhausted way that people do when they've been doing it so long, it just becomes automatic. She just kept going, because that's what she always did. There were signs, if you knew what to look for. The way she deflected certain questions in interviews. The careful language she used when anyone asked about the future, about marriage, about what came next. The smile that didn't always reach her eyes. But fans filled in the blanks with what they wanted to see, which was a couple who fought and made up and fought again, season after season, just like on TV. That's the thing about reality television. It gives you just enough to feel like you understand someone's life. You don't. You never do. In 2019, Brandi and Jarrod broke up. There was no dramatic announcement, no network statement, no tearful Instagram video. Brandi confirmed it in a comment, quietly, almost casually, the way you might mention something to a neighbor, not the way you'd expect someone to tell millions of followers that a decade-long relationship was over. But this was a woman with a massive following. Nothing stays quiet. Within hours, the speculation started. What happened? Was it the pressure of the show? Was it money? Was it something else entirely? Fans who had watched them together for years felt blindsided. They had invested in this couple, in this story, and suddenly the story had an ending nobody had prepared for. Brandi didn't give them much. She was vague, she was brief, and then she went quiet. And for a while, people accepted that. They assumed what people always assume when a long-term couple splits up, that two people who had grown up together had simply grown apart. That it was sad, but it happened. That there was nothing more to it. Then, in 2021, the full picture came out. Jarrod Schultz was arrested on a domestic violence charge involving Brandi. The details were exactly as serious as that sounds. And in the immediate aftermath, everything that Brandi hadn't said started to make a different kind of sense. The careful language, the guarded answers, the way she had stepped back from public life without ever really explaining why. She hadn't been quiet because there was nothing to say. She had been quiet because she was protecting herself and her children. Because sometimes the most courageous thing a person can do is say nothing at all until they're safe enough to say something. Think about what that actually means, what it takes. For years, she showed up to film. She delivered takes. She smiled for the cameras and played her role in a show that millions of people loved. All while carrying something privately that none of those millions of people ever saw coming. That is not weakness. That is an enormous, quiet, largely uncelebrated kind of strength. Here's what gets overlooked about Brandi Passante. After everything came out, she had every tool available to turn her story into content. Victim narratives get enormous engagement. A tearful tell-all would have gotten millions of views. Podcast invitations, documentary offers, magazine covers, all of it was available to her if she wanted it. She didn't take it. Instead, she did something that sounds simple, but is actually very hard. She kept working. She kept showing up for her kids. She built new things quietly, away from the cameras, away from the drama cycle that reality television stars so often fall back into because it's the only world they know. The show that made her famous had moved on. A new cast, new seasons, a new era. Jarrod was gone. The version of her life that had aired on A&E for years was over. But Brandi was still standing. Quietly, steadily, without asking for credit. Which is harder than it sounds when the entire internet is watching and waiting for you to either fall apart or perform your recovery for an audience. A lot of people in her position do one of two things. They disappear, or they turn the trauma into a brand. Brandi did neither. She just kept living, and honestly, that might be the most remarkable thing about her. Today, Brandi Passante is raising her children and keeping most of her life private. She posts on social media occasionally, glimpses of her kids, her home, the small, everyday things. No storage wars nostalgia, no commentary on Jarrod, no manufactured drama. Just a woman living her life on her own terms, which is something she probably didn't have the freedom to do for a very long time. People still recognize her everywhere she goes. They still ask about the show, about the storage units, about Jarrod. She handles it the way she's always handled things, directly, without making a bigger deal of it than it needs to be. And when you step back and look at the full picture, the years of holding everything together, the relationship that looked one way on camera and was something else entirely behind closed doors, the very public collapse that she navigated with more dignity than almost anyone could have managed, you realize something. We watched this woman every week for years. We thought we knew exactly who she was. We had no idea.